I was never supposed to matter. Not to anyone. Not in a place like this. I grew up where hope dies before it's even born, where broken windows outnumbered dreams, and where every night you prayed not for miracles, but just to survive until morning. My father was a name I never knew. My mother? A tired, angry woman fighting battles no one could see, and losing every single one. By the time I was 6, I had already learned the rules. Don't ask for help. Don't expect kindness. And above all, never, ever show weakness. School was no sanctuary. It was another battlefield. Another place where being different, being poor, meant you were nothing more than a target. The teachers gave up on me before I even started. The other kids? They saw me like the streets did. Something broken, something disposable. But deep down, past the hunger and the bruises, there was something else. Something no one could beat out of me. A fire. Small, fragile, but stubborn. A fire that whispered, "Not yet, not like this." They called me a mistake, a problem, an afterthought. They laughed when I dreamed and crushed it every chance they got. But they forgot one thing. You can starve a body, you can beat down a mind, but you can't kill a soul that's decided it will not lose. This is not a story about talent, not about luck, not about being chosen. This is a story about choosing yourself when no one else ever will. And it all started with a boy alone in the dark who made one silent promise to himself. I will not be who they say I am. You don't get to choose the world you're born into. You don't get to pick your family, your neighborhood, or the hand life deals you. At 8 years old, I already knew what survival meant. It meant cold mornings with no breakfast. It meant walking to school with holes in my shoes, pretending I didn't feel the cold biting my skin. It meant learning that promises were just words, and words didn't put food on the table. Every day felt the same. Wake up. Fight for a place at the table. Fight to not be invisible. Fight to not be crushed. The teachers never saw me. The ones who were supposed to guide and protect us, they wrote me off faster than they wrote detention slips. Troublemaker. Hopeless case. Bound for nothing. That's all I ever heard. No one asked why I struggled. No one cared enough to wonder why my eyes always stayed low, why my fists stayed clenched. At home, there was no safety either. My mother, exhausted from life, angry at the world, angry at herself, took it out on the only thing she could. Me. A bad grade meant slammed doors. A forgotten chore meant shouting that rattled the windows. A broken plate meant a hand raised too fast to dodge. There was no warmth. No, I'm proud of you. No bedtime stories or hugs goodnight, just silence and survival. The streets didn't feel much different, except there you either learned fast or you didn't last long. I learned to keep my head down, learned when to fight back, learned when to disappear. And somewhere along the way, I made a decision. If no one was coming to save me, then I would save myself. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but deep in my bones, I knew one thing. This life, this emptiness, it wasn't going to be my ending. I was more than what they saw. More than a mistake, more than a statistic. And even if the world wanted me to stay down, I was already planning my first step up. Not because someone believed in me, not because I had some secret talent, but because I refused to let the darkness decide who I would become. They say life sends you a lifeline when you're drowning. Sometimes it's a person. Sometimes it's a moment. For me, it was a broken-down gym at the edge of the neighborhood, and a man everyone else had already forgotten. I didn't find the gym found me. It was raining that day. One of those cold, heavy rains that soaks you to the bone before you even realize you're wet. I was running, not from anyone, just running because it was the only thing that made me feel alive. And then, through the mist, I saw it. An old battered sign swinging in the wind. North End Boxing. Open. Curiosity pulled me in. The door creaked like it hadn't been opened in years. Inside, the smell of sweat, leather, and something else. Hope, maybe. Or maybe desperation. That's when I met him. Coach Miller, an old man with eyes sharper than any blade. A scar down his cheek. A handshake like sandpaper. He didn't smile. He didn't offer any warm welcome. He just looked at me, looked through me, and said, "You want to fight?" I didn't answer, not with words. I just nodded. He threw me a pair of gloves that looked older than the building itself. "Put 'em on," he said. "Show me what you got." I didn't have much. Wild swings, sloppy footwork, no technique, no balance. Nothing but rage bottled up inside me, looking for somewhere to explode. After 2 minutes, I was flat on my back, chest heaving, pride shattered. Coach just stood over me, arms crossed. He didn't mock me. He didn't pity me. He said 5 words I'll never forget. "You're weak, but not broken." That was the first time in my life someone told me I wasn't beyond saving. I came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. There were no pep talks, no coddling, no promises of glory. Just sweat, blood, and silence. Just a battered heavy bag and the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. The gym became my church. The ring became my confessional. Every jab, every cross, every slip and pivot, they weren't just moves. They were steps. Steps away from the kid everyone had given up on. Steps towards someone I hadn't met yet. Someone stronger, faster, harder to break. There were days I couldn't lift my arms. Nights when my knuckles bled through the bandages. Mornings when every muscle screamed for mercy. But I kept showing up, because quitting was the only thing I had ever known, and I was done being that kid. Coach never said it, but I knew. Every time I walked back through that broken door, every time I put those worn-out gloves back on, I was taking my life into my own hands. One punch at a time. Progress doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself with flashing lights and parades. It comes in silence. It comes in pain. Weeks turned into months inside that broken gym. At first, it felt like nothing changed. I still got hit more than I hit back. Still gasped for air after 2 rounds on the bag. Still woke up every morning feeling like I'd been run over by a freight train. But somewhere along the way, something started to shift. My feet moved quicker. My hands found their mark. My breathing found a rhythm. It wasn't magic. It was war. A war inside my own skin. And every drop of sweat, every ache in my bones, it was proof that I was still standing. Coach saw it before I did. One evening, as I rapped my bruised knuckles for the 1,000th time, he leaned over and said, "You're starting to move like you mean it." No smile, no pat on the back, just those words, and they meant more to me than any trophy could have. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting for something, even if no one else could see it. My first real test came on a night nobody even knew about. A small underground tournament, bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling, no fancy rings, No cameras. Just a circle drawn in chalk on the floor and a crowd that came to see blood. My opponent was bigger, older, meaner. When the bell rang, he came at me like a freight train. The first punch rocked my jaw so hard I saw stars. The second drove the air from my lungs. The third dropped me to one knee. In that moment, staring at the dirty concrete floor, feeling the blood trickle from my mouth, I heard every voice that had ever told me to quit. Every voice that had said I was worthless. Every voice that said I didn't belong. And then I heard something else. Coach's voice, low and steady. You're weak, but not broken. Not broken. Not broken. I got up. I don't even remember throwing the punch that ended it. All I remember is standing over him, heart pounding, lungs screaming, and realizing something I had never felt before. I could win, not just in the ring, but in life. I could win. That night, I didn't take home a trophy. No medal, no handshake, no applause. Just 2 bruised ribs, a swollen eye, and a fire in my chest that burned brighter than anything I had ever known. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel forgotten. I felt dangerous. I felt alive. And deep down, I knew. This was just the beginning. First real fight, not some chalk circle in a basement, not some back alley brawl. This was an actual ring. Bright lights, crowd buzzing, officials with clipboards pretending they cared about the rules. And me, standing there in worn-out shoes, wearing borrowed trunks, wrapping the same old gloves over hands that had bled 1,000 times before. Across from me, a real fighter, trained, disciplined. Everything I wasn't supposed to beat. He had the footwork, the titles, the fancy trainer shouting instructions from the corner. He had the crowd on his side. Me, I had nothing, nothing but scars, and a promise I made to myself the night I decided not to be who they said I was. The bell rang, and the world shrank. There were no lights, no noise, no crowd, just the 2 of us. And the beating of my heart, loud in my ears like a war drum. He came fast, jabbing, weaving, moving with the confidence of a man who thought this was already over. And he hit hard. God, he hit hard. The first round was a blur. He danced around me, scored points, made me look like a fool. By the end of it, I could taste blood. Not from my mouth, from somewhere deeper. But between rounds, standing in my corner, hands on my knees, gasping for air, I remembered something Coach had once said. Toughness ain't how hard you hit. Toughness is how many hits you take and keep moving forward. Round 2, different story. I stopped chasing him, stopped swinging wild. I waited, watched, listened, and when he got lazy, when he threw that same right cross he'd landed 100 times before, I slipped inside and buried a shot so deep into his ribs, I felt his whole body fold. The sound he made, it wasn't pain, it was fear. In that moment, the fight changed. He wasn't the hunter anymore. I was. Punch by punch, step by step, I took back what the world said I could never have. Control, respect, a future. By the 3rd round, the noise of the crowd came flooding back. People were standing, shouting. Not for him, for me. The kid nobody believed in. The mistake, the ghost. Now they were chanting my name. And when the final bell rang and the referee raised my hand, It wasn't just a win on the scorecard. It was a win against everything that had ever tried to bury me. I didn't smile, didn't cheer. I just stood there, glove raised, staring out into the crowd, into the world that had finally been forced to see me. Not because they chose to, because I left them no choice. First real fight, first real victory. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the sweat, beneath the bruises, I knew. This wasn't the end. This was the start of something bigger, much bigger. Winning changes everything, and nothing. At first, it feels like a door finally swings open. The world, once deaf to your existence, suddenly starts to whisper your name. Strangers who never cared before now cheer like they always believed in you. Reporters shove microphones in your face. Promoters slap contracts on the table. For the first time in my life, people wanted me around. Not because they cared, because they smelled something they could use. Money, opportunity, a new fighter to bet on. And for a while, I let myself believe it was real. I started fighting bigger bouts, brighter lights, heavier paychecks. A couple of wins later, I wasn't just the kid from nowhere. I was the underdog champion. A headline, a marketable story. The money came fast, faster than I could spend it. First, I bought a new apartment for my mom. Thought maybe if I gave her enough, if I filled her world with enough shiny things, the years of silence, anger, and distance might melt away. But you can't buy love. You can't pay off resentment. She smiled when the keys hit her hand. A plastic smile stretched too tight over years of bitterness. No thank you. No hug. Just a nod, and a quick look at the next thing she could ask for. It hurt. More than any punch I'd ever taken. But I swallowed it down. After all, isn't that what I'd always done? Around the same time, I noticed something else changing. Coach. The man who taught me how to fight, how to stand, how to survive, he was pulling away. The gym sessions grew shorter. The talks grew colder. The silence between us stretched longer than the rounds in the ring. One night, after a victory I should have celebrated, I found him packing up his gear alone in the locker room. No congratulations, no advice, just a tired glance and 4 words I never saw coming. You're on your own. I asked why. He just shook his head. You stopped fighting for survival. Now you're fighting for applause. It hit harder than any knockout punch. Because deep down I knew he was right. I was chasing something I swore I never would. Their approval, their cheers, their love. And somewhere along the way, I had started losing the one thing that mattered most, myself. But pride is a stubborn enemy. Instead of fixing it, I told myself he was wrong, that I had earned this, that I deserved to finally enjoy life after everything I'd been through. I signed the big contracts. I smiled for the cameras. I said the right things in interviews. And for a while, it worked. The world loved the new me. The shinier, more polished version, the only person who didn't, was the man I saw staring back at me in the mirror. He looked tired, hollow, like he knew a storm was coming, and deep down, so did I. The fall didn't come all at once. It never does. It starts small. A missed punch, a second too slow, a bruise that takes longer to heal, a voice in the back of your head whispering, maybe you're not untouchable after all. I ignored it, told myself I was just tired, distracted, busy with the interviews, the sponsorships, the fake smiles. But the ring doesn't care about excuses. The ring strips you bare. reveals exactly who you are and who you're not when the lights are brightest and the blood runs hot. My first real loss came against a fighter half my age, hungry, focused, everything I used to be. From the opening bell, I knew I was in trouble. He didn't fight for the cameras. He fought like his life depended on it, because maybe it did. Every round, he chipped away at me. Every punch reminded me of a truth I had been too proud to face. You can't fake hunger. You can't fake heart. And that night, under the roar of a disappointed crowd, with the taste of blood and failure thick in my mouth, I realized just how far I had drifted from the kid who once fought to breathe. They booed when my hand stayed down, turned away as I staggered back to the locker room. The same people who cheered my rise now whispered about my fall. That's when the calls stopped coming. The promoters found new blood. The sponsors pulled their logos. I was yesterday's news, a headline they didn't bother to print. For the first time in years, I stood alone. No cameras, no cheers, no coach, just me and the silence. And it hit me, harder than any punch ever could. I had become everything I swore I never would. Chasing approval, forgetting who I was, fighting for the wrong reasons. The world didn't take me down. I did, piece by piece, choice by choice. So I did the only thing I knew how to do when the world turned its back. I got up, not with bravado, not with some big speech, quietly, painfully. I went back to the beginning, back to the broken gym with the flickering lights, back to the bag that never lied, back to the silence where I could hear my own heartbeat again. Day after day, I trained in the dark. No cameras, no fans, no applause, just work, just pain, just purpose, punch by punch, step by step. Not to prove something to the world, to prove something to myself, that I wasn't done, that I wasn't finished, that I still had one more fight left. Not for fame, not for money, but for the kid who once looked out a cracked window and swore he'd never give up. I owed him that much. And this time, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I was fighting to be whole again. The comeback wasn't announced. There were no headlines, no flashing lights, no fanfare, just a quiet name scribbled on a fight card, an opponent barely old enough to shave, a crowd expecting nothing. Perfect. I didn't come back for them. I didn't come back for revenge or fame or redemption. I came back for the fight, for the kid who once stood in the rain, fists clenched, daring the world to try and break him, for the man who got lost chasing things that were never meant to be caught, for the soul that refused to die, no matter how many times life tried to bury it. The night of the fight, the locker room was quiet. Just the sound of my hands wrapping slow and steady. The smell of old leather and new fear hanging in the air. I didn't feel fear. I felt ready for whatever came. Win or lose, it didn't matter anymore. The only thing that mattered was stepping into that ring and giving every piece of myself. The bell rang, and I moved. Not chasing, not running, just fighting. Not for a belt, not for a check, not for applause, for honor, for peace, for myself. The kid inside me didn't flinch when the punches landed. The man I became didn't waver when the rounds got long. And when the final bell echoed across the arena, it wasn't the roar of the crowd that filled my ears. It was silence. The kind of silence you earn. The kind of silence that tells you, you didn't just survive. You won. Hand raised. Victory given. But I already knew the truth. The real victory was the journey. The nights nobody saw. The mornings nobody cared about. The losses that broke me. The will that rebuilt me. That's the thing they never tell you about legends. It's not the wins that define you. It's what you do after you lose. It's how you rise after you fall. It's choosing to fight when there's no one left cheering. And so, if you ask me who I am today, I'm not a champion because I wear a belt. I'm a champion because I never stopped fighting for the person I was meant to become. Not for the world, not for fame, for me, and for the boy who never gave up.